squats can be a very hard exercise to do in the gym. And I know this for a fact because when I started powerlifting, that was the movement I was struggling the most with. During my first ever powerlifting competition, I did a 160 kilos, 350 pounds squat, and that was rough. Recently though, I was able to squat 280 kilos or 617 pounds at the exact same body weight. And in order to get my squat stronger, I had to learn about certain back positions, but also some other technical and programming cues. So in today's video, I'll share with you guys some techniques that you can use starting today in order to become a squat monster. First cue, engage your back muscles. Your back needs to be tight for heavy squats. There's no way around it. But most people will try to get tight like this, and that's exactly where things can go wrong. If you're overly retracting your shoulders in order to achieve this back position, you'll end up with flared ribs. Because of that, you might end up in a butt weak position, increasing a lot the tension on the low back. The main issue is that people will try to engage their back by pinching their shoulder blades together or by overly emphasizing the engagement of the traps. So if you're trying to actively shrug the bar when you're setting up under a squat, that might be one of the main issues as to why you're struggling to get stronger on this lift. And that's actually the fact for two main reasons. First, it's actually pretty hard to just simply keep this retracted position alone. So imagine having to do it with a barbell that weighs several hundred pounds on your back. It's almost impossible to keep this position. Second, like I said, if you're trying to overly engage your traps, you'll end up with flared ribs and your pelvis will switch into what we call anterior pelvic tilt, which is a weaker position for squats. You have less ab engagement and you usually have more tension on the low back. So those are the main reasons as to why, although you want a tight and engaged back, you don't want to do it by shrugging the bar. You don't want to do it by pinching the shoulder blades back. Instead, the position that you want to use and the position that I personally use whenever I'm squatting is pretty similar to the one that you'll have at the bottom of a vertical row. So essentially, your back muscles will be engaged, but your shoulders will be down and not necessarily back and up. On top of being a much more stable way to activate your back muscles in order to have the bar on your back, you completely remove the problem that I said about having the ribs flared and also having the anterior pelvic tilt. Because when your shoulders are down, it's much easier to engage your abs and to keep your core stacked. So what you want ideally is looking from the side. You want a line that goes chest, ribs, and pelvis. So if some of you guys are experiencing a lot of back pain whenever you're squatting, I really recommend you switch this back position because you might think it's helping you out to have like the traps super engaged, but in reality, this may cause some loss of strength, but also increase stress on the back and potentially higher risk of injury. So now that we've seen why you want to engage your back this way and not by shrugging, I'll share with you one cue that I use whenever I'm setting under a bar. Before you're starting your squat, you always want to stack up the bar on top of you. So essentially, you don't want to like try to lift the bar up. You always want to keep your shoulders down and stack the bar onto you. By doing so, like I said, you'll have the back muscles engaged, very good. But on top of that, your shoulders are down, but it's much easier to brace and have a much more efficient, but also technical squat. Second cue, the thumbless grip. In a previous video, I talked about the elbow drive. In my opinion, it's one of the most underrated aspects of squatting. Obviously, the legs are really important to lift heavy, but the elbow drive is going to be how well you can transfer the strength from the legs up to the bar that is sitting on top of your back. So if you have a bad elbow drive, you might jeopardize how much you can actually squat. Let's say you have the strength to squat 200 kilos, but if your elbow drive is not good or not optimal, and if you dump the bar forward, maybe you can only lift 160 or 170 kilos. A bad elbow drive is when your elbows are driving up during a squat. When it happens, it's much easier to have the bar roll into your back, and you almost can end up in a guillotine position where if the bar goes too high up in your back, you end up in a position where you can't do anything and absolutely not use the strength from your legs in order to drive up. So that's why in order to have a proper elbow drive, you want your elbows to point slightly down. So you don't want them like perpendicular to the floor, but you want to have them slightly pointing down. And most importantly, you want to keep them in this position. So if whenever you go up, you see your elbows rise, this means you're dumping your strength forward and not up, and that's not helping you in order to get the bar up. Now, maybe some of you guys understand this aspect, but have issues applying it. And that was the case for me. Whenever I was using a regular grip, wrapping with my thumbs, it was pretty easy for me to have this bad elbow drive and have the bar roll into my back. So what I changed was I started to use the thumbless grip. When you're not wrapping the thumb around the bar, it's much easier to have your elbows pointing down. And like I said, if your elbows are a bit more down, then usually your elbow drive tends to get much better. So if you're struggling with bad elbow drive on the squat, I definitely recommend you give the thumbless grip a go. Now, I want to make something very clear. It's not mandatory to use a thumbless grip in order to have a good elbow drive. And some very good powerlifters have a really good elbow drive, but they're using a regular grip, so wrapping the thumb around the bar. Like I said, it wasn't the case for me, and that's why I'm using the thumbless grip. But it's not you have to, it's more so you can try it. Now, even though the thumbless grip is very, very good for squats, in my opinion, it's not easy to experience some discomfort, especially at the wrists or even sometimes at the elbows during some heavy squats. So that's why right now I'll give you two of my top recommendations in order to properly use the thumbless grip. First, you can and usually you have to use wrist straps. Almost every top powerlifter that is squatting heavy weights is using wrist straps, because even without the thumbless grip, even with a regular grip, the wrists have a lot of tension whenever you're squatting, and you have sometimes more tension with the thumbless grip. That's why I personally use and really recommend the SBD flexible wrist straps. Those can give you very, very good support, and in my opinion, they're a must-have on squats, especially with a low bar. Second recommendation, make sure to warm up your upper body even when you're squatting. I know this for a fact, but some lifters will not warm up their upper body because they're thinking, oh, it's squats, it's lower body, so let's warm up the lower body. I agree with that. You have to warm up your lower body. And by the way, if a warm-up video is something that interests you guys, definitely let me know in the comments. But you do want to warm up your lower body, but also the upper body, and again, especially when you're doing low bar squat. So that's why before I'm squatting, I'm always doing the same routine. So I'll do a superset combined of dumbbell curls, lateral raises, and military press with some light dumbbells, and I'll usually do 6 reps of each exercise for 2 up to 3 rounds. So I'll do straight 6 reps dumbbell curls, 6 reps lateral raises, 6 reps military press, and I'll do, like I said, like 2 up to maybe 3 rounds. This is more than enough to properly warm up your upper body for some good squatting. Now let's talk about the final cue, which is more of a programming cue, and it's you should squat more often. We all know some gym bros that will use every excuse to avoid hitting legs and doing their squat. I played football yesterday, so I already trained legs. I don't need to do squats. Charles Oliveira just won, so it's okay to just skip my squat. Every excuse in the world is okay to them. But no, in all seriousness, if you want to get your squat stronger, you need to practice it more often. When I started powerlifting in France, it was very, very common to say to powerlifters to squat only once a week. The idea was squatting is very, very hard on the body, on the joints, so you should only squat once a week, and then on the other sessions, you're doing like regular bodybuilding accessories. But most people first extremely overrate how actually taxing the squat is. In my opinion, unless your name is Jesus Olivares, you're squatting over 1,000 pounds, the squat is not like that crazy taxing lift. And also it's all about like volume and intensity. If you're always doing 1 RMs, 1 rep max, very, very high intensity all day, every day, then obviously you cannot do that like 2-3 times a week. But if you're training with a proper program, you can definitely squat 2, 3, 4, even 5 times a week. Now, I don't think everybody should squat, let's say 5 times a week, but I think everybody should squat at least 2 up to 3 times every week. By the way, I'm pausing this video very briefly. If you guys want to follow some powerlifting programs that I personally designed and followed in order to get stronger, I recommend you go to thepanash.app. That's my training app, and with just one monthly subscription, you can access more than 15 powerlifting programs. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced lifter, I'm sure you'll find a program that will suit your needs and get you stronger. So if you want to support my work, make sure to go to thepanash.app. And now we're back to the video. On top of this, that the squat is not like that crazy taxing lift, most people don't consider the fact that the squat is a pretty technical lift. You have to be somewhat skilled in order to properly squat. And skill, technique, comes with practice. So if you're squatting once a week, there's no way you'll have enough practice, enough volume build in order to get a more technical and stronger squat. So that's why, in my opinion, the sweet spot for squat frequency is between 2 and up to 3 squats. Personally, what I usually do, I squat on Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. One pro tip though, make sure to always change the workload that you're using. For example, you always want to have some higher intensity sessions balanced with some lower intensity sessions. I'll give you another quick example. Usually Monday is the day that I accumulate volume on squats. Because I'm doing volume, I'm doing higher reps, so around 5 up to 6 reps sometimes, and sometimes even 7, but it's more so my volume day. And that's why I'm using intensities ranging from 70 up to maybe 80% of my 1RM. But on my strength day, which is usually the Saturday, that's where I'll have lower reps with higher intensities. So usually on Saturdays, I'm using weights more around 85 up to 88, even sometimes 90% of above. But like I said, I have my volume days, more moderate intensity, and my heavier days, higher intensity, in order to develop my CNS, stuff like that. By the way, if you're interested in how you can use those different rep ranges and intensities in order to follow a powerlifting program, I have a video that you'll find here that explains all of that to you guys. But yeah, essentially you want to squat more often, but use different workloads in order to not run into a wall and be able to develop different skills, all useful in order to become a squat monster. That was it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a couple of things. As always, if that's the case, one of the best ways is to subscribe to the channel, to leave a comment. The comment can be something like, oh, thank you for the advice, Pana. Thanks to that, I was able to squat 500 pounds, and that will make my heart full of joy. Also, if you want to follow my training, I'm usually posting my training stuff on Insta, so my Insta will be here and also in the description, so make sure to give me a follow there. On top of that, if you want to see how I'm training on a daily basis. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.